billionaire statist George Soros has been helping Obama and globalist forces to federalize control over American police forces under the guise of pushing criminal justice reform, hacked emails and documents from his shadowy open society philanthropic empire revealed. From funneling tens of millions to radical activist groups and race-mongers to building what leaked documents refer to as a national movement to reform law enforcement and working with the White House to do it, Soros' fingerprints can be found all over the growing anti-police chaos that has enveloped U.S. cities in recent years. The agenda is clear: stripping communities of self-government and imposing federal cops. The Soros plot outlined in Open Society Foundation documents involves, among other elements, helping Obama impose his United Nations-backed guidelines and standards on American police departments, at least at first. Eventually, the goal is to impose a national police force on America accountable not to local communities, as has traditionally and constitutionally been the case for centuries, but to the increasingly lawless federal executive branch. The implications for freedom and self-government of transferring control over police to the White House are massive. As The New American has been reporting for decades, the establishment's long-term goal is to centralize all coercive power in its own hands. A national police force, or at least federally controlled state and local police departments, are a crucial component of that agenda. While grassroots efforts and constitutional limitations on federal power have made the goal hard to achieve, the Obama administration has made more progress on nationalizing law enforcement than any other president in U.S. history. Soros, widely ridiculed as Dr. Evil by critics, has helped in a major way. Unsurprisingly, Soros' minions celebrated Obama's efforts in the leaked documents, and sought to capitalize on and support them. In particular, the decision-makers of the billionaire's U.S. programs touted the 60 recommendations issued by the so-called President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing, a radical outfit created by an executive order from Obama. They call that effort promising, and note that one of Soros' minions on his board even served on the task force. The report also noted that a number of grantees receiving Soros' largesse testified at the hearings. Essentially, and unsurprisingly, Obama's task force outlined various strategies the federal government could use to usurp control over local police departments. Those strategies included, perhaps most infamously, recommendations that bribes, federal grants, be used to trap local officials into obeying the White House by making sure the grants come with strings attached. Soros agents lament the federal government's limited authority to dictate reform at the local level, but nonetheless celebrate efforts to ensure effective implementation of Obama's radical agenda among local police agencies. The plot involves getting local police departments and law enforcement agencies to accept federal money for various purposes, usually not even very much money. Once they accept it, they would supposedly be bound by Obama's guidelines and standards. The strategy is not new and was used earlier in the administration's tenure on education. The similarities led critics to blast the Obama Cops program, a reference to the extraordinarily unpopular Common Core, also known as Obama Core, an Obama-backed plot to nationalize education standards imposed with bribes and bludgeoning from the White House. Other Obama police schemes touted by Soros' minions included the Policing Data Initiative, in which the feds would hand out taxpayer money to local police in exchange for submission to uniform federal data gathering and sharing standards. The document also celebrates the increasingly radicalized Justice Department's pilot programs to hijack control over police in 6 American cities. The plot involves developing federal guidance for local cops and deploying federal experts to do everything from fight crime and build trust to reduce bias. Other cities have been bullied, threatened, and terrorized by the administration into submission using consent decrees. Operatives for Soros, a protege of the powerful Rothschild banking dynasty, were only too happy to help. We are gaining a better understanding of these efforts in order to determine how best USP, Soros Foundation's U.S. programs can use this moment to create a national movement, the hacked document explained. We have already had a set of preliminary conversations with about a dozen key stakeholders and will undertake a field scan to map the areas of work currently underway to advance police reform, including an assessment of the redundancies and gaps in work, and opportunities for collaboration. As we proceed, we will engage the funder network we helped to establish. In other words, Soros, who has dumped tens of millions into fomenting riots, hate, and dangerous anti-police extremism, was seeking to build an astroturf, fake grassroots, national movement to support Obama's unconstitutional efforts to usurp control over Americans' local police departments. To that end, leaked documents show that Soros and his minions have been showering huge amounts of money on Black Lives Matter and other outfits with similar agendas, and then blatantly lying to the public about it when confronted. The document also outlines a discussion on exploiting alleged police abuse to create first local reform, and then see how and if that can be leveraged into a national movement. Such a scheme will require frank discussion about the strengths and weaknesses of the field of policing reform advocates and the possibilities on the national federal landscape for reform, the document says. We are aiming to get board guidance on the direction a committed effort on our part might take. The Soros minions also explain how the puppets receiving Soros money were being exploited to push stronger federal control over police. The radical Soros front groups were pushing the Justice Department to use its existing authority, to place conditions on the funding it provides to local police departments, requiring basic elements of good practice in exchange for federal funds. The document says, with good practice meaning whatever Soros and Obama, not local voters, want your police department to do. While lamenting that even a progressive attorney general has not done everything they want, Soros agents boast that they are using their key grantees to keep up the pressure. As if to confirm the thesis of an article published by the New American Magazine in its September 14, 2015 Police Under Fire special issue, the recently leaked document also outlines Soros' strategy to use pressure from above and below to achieve the extremists' objectives. For example, the report outlines an inside strategy in which Soros minions seek to better engage law enforcement and governmental leadership. This is also known as lobbying, or pressure from above. Then there is what the document calls the outside strategy, in which Soros showers money on fake grassroots efforts to create the appearance of public support for Soros' extremist anti-police, anti-liberty, anti-American agenda. Another layer of grassroots and youth-oriented groups like Freedom Side, Ferguson Action, Black Lives Matter, and Million Hoodies Movement for Justice are also advocating for specific reforms, the document explained. Another Soros document shows Soros provided $650,000 to invest in technical assistance and support for the groups at the core of the burgeoning Black Lives Matter movement. And that is just the tip of the iceberg. The Washington Times recently reported that more than $33 million in grants to the Black Lives Matter movement comes from Soros Open Society foundations. In addition to Soros and Obama, the UN has also joined the effort to fundamentally transform America by, among other schemes, nationalizing America's police departments. The Civil Rights Division of the U.S. Department of Justice has provided oversight and recommendations for improvement of police services in a number of cities with consent decrees, the UN Special Rapporteur from Kenya said after a ludicrous UN investigation of the United States. This is one of the most effective ways to reduce discrimination in law enforcement, and it needs to be beefed up and increased to cover as many of the 18,000-plus local law enforcement jurisdictions. Close Obama confidant and radical race hustler Al Sharpton, who was caught on film urging supporters to start offing the pigs, has called for the same measures. Speaking last year amid establishment efforts to encourage a race war, Sharpton said the Justice Department should take over policing in this country. However, the controversial figure, who owes millions in taxes but regularly visits the Obama White House, acknowledged that we're going to have to fight states' rights. Other revelations from the recently hacked documents show that Soros, like the UN and Obama, has been using his money to assault the constitutionally protected rights of Americans. Among other rights in Soros' crosshairs are gun rights, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, the right to self-government, and more. He has also been exposed recently trying to corrupt Christianity, buy support from Catholic bishops in the United States, promote abortion in Catholic countries, and flood the Western world with Islamic refugees from globalist-fueled wars in the Middle East. Americans and their elected officials must resist the efforts of Soros and his globalist allies in the Obama administration to take over state and local police departments. That can be accomplished by supporting your local police, and keeping them independent from federal control. Of course, that means local officials must refuse to take federal bribes with strings attached. But American liberty and constitutional self-government may well depend on making sure that the out-of-control federal government is never able to hijack control of Americans' law enforcement.